Welcome back to Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta, coming to you from the LaPanta household. It's been a minute since we were here because you were in Costa Rica and I was in Boston and Montreal. And welcome back. You look a little tan.
Yeah, it was quite a trip, and man, was it we got down to the beach community of Santa Teresa, which is where I was when we did the last show, and what a cool little town. Weather was unbelievable, and it really was cool to see the jungles, the kind of the rainforest type places. I think it's more technically jungle than rainforest, but it was so cool.
Yeah.
But the two different parts of the country were very different that we saw, and Santa Teresa was terrific. I'd recommend that for anybody. They're really starting to expand with high quality places to stay, but they're just dropped into the middle of old time Costa Rica. So you walk down the streets and the streets are barely paved. They're like dirt roads with some rocks. And most people drive like ATVs or UTVs because it's murder on a car bouncing down these roads. But it's a cool vibe, and the restaurants are terrific. The food was absolutely mind-blowing. I had no idea it was going to be as good as it was.
You have to tell me about the plane you took, because I'll be honest, I saw it on your Instagram and got nervous. I was thinking, like, it just reminded me of, like, I wonder if this is what it was like to be like, Richie Valens and Buddy Holly and the Big Bopper and everybody.
Well, I'll tell you, it was really eerie because this was the first leg of our flight home. Santa Teresa's down on the Pacific side, way south. And we had to get back to San Jose to fly to Dallas. San Jose is where we flew in, more north central, I guess, Costa Rica. And we had taken a van down there. And I want to say it was 6 hours from where we were staying in Fortuna. Mm-hmm. Plus we had like a 2-hour bus or van ride from the airport to get to Fortuna in the first place. So this was a commercial flight. You pull into the airport and you're driving down a dirt road, and it looks like a county fair amusement park with like a couple animals out roaming around and stuff. You pull in, there is no security other than that you walk in and show them your ID. You stand on a scale with your carry-on and everything, plus then weigh your other bags. But you walk down, we're walking down this walkway, and the guy at the bottom is like, yep, grab a water or a beer if you want in the cooler and pick any seat you want on the plane. So we get on the plane. There are 3 seats in each row because there were 2 on one side, 1 on the other. Maybe 15 people on the plane, and we were 6 in our group. And I was in the cockpit, basically. I was in the second row, and guy turns around and, hey, Pura Vida, we got a 28-minute flight. And
no door in the cockpit.
No door.
No flight attendant.
No flight attendant. And the bags in the back were throw your backpacks behind the curtain and grab a beer or water and let's go. But it was kind of cool. So we took this flight. It was about a 28-minute flight. That got us up to San Jose. Then we flew from San Jose into Dallas, where we missed our connection, had to stay in Dallas. Margot's never been to Dallas, and I've always told her it's kind of a cool city to walk around and everything. But we got there, it was 5 degrees in Dallas, and our luggage had made it home. Mm-hmm. So all we had was our carry-on bags and one set of clothes that we were wearing. And we got stuck in Dallas. We landed there.
Which, by the way, is not allowed. They should not have put your...
I don't know what happened to it. Yeah, I mean, they said, your bags aren't... Because the flight home got canceled. So they put us on a flight like at 5:30 the next afternoon. So we had got there at like 9 o'clock at night. Had all day the next day to wait without any luggage. And it was too cold to go out and walk around really anyway in Dallas.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a golf shirt on. That was because that's what I was wearing on this travel day home. And so that was no good, but we made it home. It was great. Yeah. But that first leg, that little plane was, I know I saw somebody on there like, oh, tough life on a private jet. I was like, this was not a private jet. This was a commercial ticket that we purchased to fly home.
That's funny. So welcome to the Aquarius Home Services studio, Russo and LaPanta. Anthony's voice will be well conditioned for Tuesday's Detroit game because it's been a while since he's called a game. It's been a while since I covered a Wild game, but man, we both missed an incredible game in Detroit on Saturday afternoon. Brock Faber, 36 hours or so after playing the most amount of minutes of any United States and Canada player in the championship of the Four Nations face-off, goes and plays more than 30 minutes against Detroit. Matt Boldy has a goal and an assist, and the Wild erase two. They were down 2 twice in the game, wind up coming back, another empty attack, 6-on-5 goal. Rossi, the Wild have done this 3 times on the road. Rossi has 2 of the goals, and this one he sets up Marcus Foligno for the tying goal and force overtime. Then a really, I thought, bad call in overtime.
Terrible call.
I get what the referee there, Jake Brink, is probably seeing. He sees the hook of his legs by Marco Rossi, but let's be honest, Kane took 2 more strides.
He took 2 more steps.
Took the biggest dive in the world.
I was sitting here watching the game and I saw it and I said, that is a terrible call.
Yeah.
And I said, that's like somebody falling down because they got hit in the shins 7 steps ago.
There were so many bad calls in the game, and we'll get to a couple of them because I want to talk to you about the goal that Dylan Larkin was credited for. But man, I mean, just an outstanding hockey game. First of all, the pace of play was terrific. Faber gets absolutely clocked, clean hit by DeBrincat. And then Boldy goes and basically sticks up for him. Rossi too. I mean, that was actually what was the coolest part of that is like, I'm all for them sticking up for Brock Faber there, even though it's a clean hit. You see a guy, your number one defenseman go down that hard, you got to react. And so I don't mind that at all. But I thought it was awesome that the Wild skilled guys were the first ones in there. Unfortunately, the Wild wind up down a man there. But man, it was just a heck of a hockey game, Anthony.
Yeah, it was. And I agree with you on that play. I hate the guys who you have to fight because you made a big hit. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it wasn't a fight. So, but I like the guys coming to his defense. I mean, it was a clean hit by DeBrincat. I thought the referees got it right. I mean, Boldy gets the extra 2 because he comes flying from halfway across the rink. And yes, he got elbowed by Kopp, but that should have been extra 2 against Minnesota. But I just thought the way the Wild responded, I thought the pace was good. I thought Minnesota looked a little off for the first 2 periods, but there've been so many games this year where even in spots like that, they've found ways to come back. They've got 6 games now. They've come from 2 goals down to win. Seattle's the only team with more. I think it's 15 come from behind wins overall for the season. And that's saying something when you're a team that really doesn't score. You're not talking about a team averaging 4 goals a game. And so the ability to come from those kind of deficits, even though your game is built on defensive structure, I think says a lot about the makeup of the team. And how good has Marcus Foligno been lately?
Yeah.
I just think his game has been terrific. It's nice to see him starting to get rewarded on the score sheet. We're going to have a graphic in Tuesday's game. I was working on it as soon as the game was over yesterday. Since December 23rd, he's got 4 empty net goals and now a 6-on-5 extra attacker goal. Like, he's the specialist when you're in 6-on-5 situations.
And everyone, as Phil and Stanley go loco here, like every one of the empty net goals took an immense amount of grit too. I mean, it's just crazy the way that he scores those empty netters. But he's been so good defensively this year. Like, I don't think that people really have a true understanding of how good of a season Marcus has had. And considering his last 2 years were cut short because of significant abdominal issues, clearly he is looking good and feeling good right now.
Well, and I know we've differed on the opinions on him for a while in that, I mean, I felt right away. I thought this was such a great addition and a great extension for the Wild because you need a guy like that. Everybody in the league would love to have that guy on their third line. And because he's such a responsible player, he has all the leadership characteristics. He's physical, he's willing to fight, but he also has some skill, more than I think a lot of people ever give him credit for. And I just think he's such a valuable player in so many areas that sometimes are hard to quantify. And if you start to look down the road at teams that can win and what it would take for the Wild to win, that's the kind of guy. You got to have a third line made up of guys like that. They can't be league minimum type guys or $1 million guys. You need some experience, some grit, some savvy, some leadership in that kind of a role.
Yeah. And, another great game by Marco Rossi, as I mentioned, assisting on the Marcus Foligno goal. And then getting the overtime winner where he initially fans on the first shot. But what I love about the goal is that he stays with it. He doesn't do a flyby of the net, so he gets a stick back on the puck and then beats Cam Talbot with an excuse me goal. But there's so many guys in the league that could really take a learning lesson from that play, including guys on the Minnesota Wild. I mean, if that was Murat Huzadinov, he would have been in Grand Rapids after the first shot.
All right, I have to put you on hold for 1 second.
Okay.
We have an Amazon Prime truck and our watchdogs are going bonkers.
Okay.
Give me 1 second.
Keep
talking about yourself.
Yeah. So, I mean, that to me is the biggest thing. And then the one thing that I really didn't love about the game was the goal by Dylan Larkin. Like it was a good goal. But at some point here, to me, sanity has to prevail. Like I don't understand how the Situation Room in Toronto, which you and I have been at a million times, could allow that goal to begin with. Regardless of the horn sounds, that the horn is not anything official. Regardless of the red light sounds, that's not anything official. But when the referee is pointing good goal at the net, that should signify good goal. It should not absolutely mean that play continues just because he was wrong. Everybody stopped playing. If Eriksson Ek destroyed Larkin there and put him through the goalpost, he would have probably given a penalty. Like the actual clock, if you look at it, actually stops with the good goal signal. When the referee goes good goal and he is wrong, then it should not be a good goal. It's that simple. And so Dylan Larkin, I'm saying on the review, Dylan Larkin, that should not have counted. I don't understand how the league justifies that play.
So I think there were two things in play there. And number one, I agree completely because, in fact, I think I tweeted that as soon as the play happened. I said, what's Eriksson Ek supposed to do?
Right.
If he turns around and wipes out Dylan Larkin and the first puck had, in fact, gone in, it's a penalty for sure. And so I've always felt that there's times where if the referees let this go on, it can't, there is no easy way. What if it's the same thing like when they think goalies have the puck covered and they don't? Like if you just assume he's got it covered, you can't. You have to the referees have to be the ones that stop the play right there. And I actually thought when that puck hit the post, I mean, Fleury quits.
Yeah.
But for a moment, the puck's underneath him. You could have argued that the whistle should have blown at that point. The puck only gets exposed because he starts to stand up thinking that there's already been a goal.
Right.
The arena's got the horn blowing and the lights blinking and everything. I mean, who in the world thinks the play is still alive and going on?
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. I think once the official signals goal, you have to stop the play. And if it wasn't in, then it's a face-off and you move on. But you can't let the play continue when half the players are stopping. And I just think I know that the rule that the referees are not supposed to blow the whistle when a goal goes in. So technically the play goes on. It's the rule that's wrong, not the way the officials interpreted it.
Yeah, but again, I don't understand where the Situation Room could even allow that. The referee is pointing good goal. So is that just totally unofficial? That doesn't matter to anything? Then how do you know when there's a good goal or not and to quit on a play? Right. Just the whole
I agree,
thing is
but I'm
insane.
saying I think it's the rule that's wrong, not the way they interpret it. The rule says that that him pointing does not stop play.
Yeah.
I heard the broadcast, Dave Jackson, I think maybe was
when's the puck, when's it stop play? That, I guess that's my point.
Yeah, because they point, and if the puck's laying in the net, then does it stop? I don't know, really. Yeah. I mean, that's actually a good question to it, because I heard Dave Jackson, I believe it was Dave Jackson who was on the broadcast yesterday as the rules analyst, and he says referees don't blow the whistle when a puck goes in, they just point. Well, that everybody else stops when they see him point, and then when you throw on top of it the arena blowing the horn and sending off the red light. Now, I know that can't stop play because that happens, I shouldn't say frequently, but it happens a few times a year where the red light goes on because the goal judge or the people in the game ops think the puck went in. I think you have to change the rule to be that once that referee points, maybe he does just have to blow the whistle.
Whitmore was the one that made that ruling in the Situation Room, because I saw it on TV, and I'm definitely going to, when I see him at the GM's meetings in a couple of weeks, I'm just going to ask his interpretation of that. Because to me, it just makes absolutely no sense. Marc-Andre Fleury, excellent in that game. Anthony, it's so funny because if you pay attention to Instagram, Fleury and Talbot spent their bye weeks together, or Four Nations break together with the Spurgeons. Marco Rossi and his girlfriend Stephanie were down there as well and spent a little time there. But it's so funny that you have the two opposing goalies, in each of the net in their first maybe 2 games back, both playing the game. But Fleury just outstanding, breaks another record, passing Luongo for games. It just, I don't know. It was just a really, really quality game. Then in overtime, we mentioned the bad call, justice prevails. Finally, the Wild get a huge clutch penalty kill on a 3-on-4 in overtime against one of the top power plays in the NHL. They kill it, and then Eriksson Ek hits Rossi with the breakaway.
It was a great finish. Justice was served. I loved Rossi's comments about, did I fan on it on purpose or not? I can't tell you. I thought Eriksson Ek was great. That pass was terrific. I thought his play that led to a breakaway that drew a penalty earlier in the game was outstanding. I thought it was one of his better games. And yeah, it's a game where it was one of many where I've thought this season the Wild were at a little bit of a tipping point where, and you don't want to over dramatize what one game can be, but remember there were a couple times they lost 2 in a row in one-sided fashion at home and then had to go to Denver or something like that, where you felt like this is one of those games you got to find a way because it could send things spiraling in the wrong direction. And this game I thought was important. First game out of the break, they're in a good spot, but it's not a lock yet that they're a playoff team. They're in a good spot, but they're also in a spot with very little margin for error when it comes to the other teams that you're battling within the division. Dallas and Colorado are close. And if you had gone in there and let's say you just lose the game 3-1 and now you face that same Red Wings team in a couple days at home, you've got a tough trip with back-to-back games in Utah and Denver coming up. And you just start to think like you could see it turning into a 3 out of 4 or something pretty quickly. And coming back and finding a way to get 2 points in that game, just think how disheartening it is for the teams that are on the bubble. The teams like Vancouver, like Calgary, like Seattle, like Utah, where they're watching those teams in front and in games against the East where there's a clear winner for the other contenders in the West, to see them come from behind and win it in fashion like that, you know how disheartening those kind of games are for the teams that are in the chase. And I think that was one of those games where I think the Wild probably really put a significant dent into the hopes of some of those teams that are on the outside looking in.
And definitely overcame a lot of adversity in that game. We are recording this on Sunday night, so Colorado has a game still tonight, and Calgary has a game tonight. But before those outcomes, and the Wild will have 2 games in hand on the Avalanche. Before those outcomes, the Wild are 4 points over Colorado and 12 points clear of the 9th team, which is Calgary. So we'll see what happens with them. Wild play Detroit at home, then go on the road, play back-to-back games against Utah and Colorado, then come home against the Bruins, I believe one against the Bruins, and then hit the road again for Seattle and Vancouver. Vancouver is the night of the trade deadline. The trade deadline will happen 5 hours before that game. And frankly, one of the big things that we're going to be having to look at going into the trade deadline is the health of Kirill Kaprizov. So the Wild have won 5 of 7 since this latest stint of Kirill Kaprizov being out of the lineup. So 5 of 7 since it was announced that he was having surgery, minimum of 4 weeks, which always seemed like a shockingly small timeline to me. As Bill Guerin said on to me throughout this Four Nations tournament, and that we've been discussing on the pod and on radio and things like that, is that he's going to be out longer. So the question is, by March 7th, Bill Guerin must get clarity on Kirill Kaprizov's timeline. And so there's 5 games up until then. But the reality is that the Wild don't know how long he's going to be out. And now a lot of it's not because of, just them. Like his agent, Paul Theophanis, is very much part of this. They're using other medical teams that and things like that. They've got to get some sort of clarity because that will absolutely come up with Bill Guerin and the management team's strategy going into the deadline. If he is going to be back by in late March and the end of the season is April 15th and the Wild are not locked at the trade deadline, you can't just say that he's on season-ending LTIR. for multiple reasons. One is that Kirill Kaprizov's not going to want to sit out the rest of the year. Two, he's your best bet to make the playoffs. Three, as we saw 2 years ago in the Dallas series, he missed 13 straight games. Then the Wild held him out of 2 of the final 4 games. And he admitted after that series that he was absolutely rusty and off and all that. And he needs a runway. It makes no... he is your best bet to make the playoffs.
I agree, and it would be different if you're Winnipeg,
right?
Where right now you're in,
absolutely, or Tampa a couple years ago, or Vegas when they, this is not a situation like where you're just going to play
and
games.
It's also the type of player. I think your point about Kaprizov is valid. It didn't affect Nikita Kucherov, and Mark Stone plays a different game. Kaprizov is a guy who we've seen he needs sometimes 4, 5, 6 games to get ready early in a year, even before he starts to look like himself. And that just it might be the way he plays the game, might be the type of person he is. I have no idea, but it's real.
Yeah, absolutely. And so anyway, to my point is they've got to get clarity of his situation going into the deadline. If there is a chance that timeline is going to go to April 15th or close to it, then yes, it might make sense to keep him out and then use that $9 million to try to add a top 6 forward or 2, make some potential moves. Without anybody on long-term injury reserve, it is going to be difficult, if not impossible, for the Wild to make an impactful trade. They would have to move money out. They would probably need to find a third-party conduit to make some sort of move. If Kaprizov is out for the rest of the season and they can use that $9 million, then you go out and maybe make some moves. I think Brock Nelson makes a lot of sense if they could continue if they have interest. I think Brock Besser makes a lot of sense. Now, if you have a chance to sign those guys in the offseason, it would be a shame to go out and give significant assets up for either of those players if you have a chance to sign them. But if those guys could potentially help, it makes a lot of sense. I'd much rather Brock Besser on the second line than Marcus Johansson. And what I like about Nelson, even though I'm still, really skeptical on whether it makes sense to give somebody that's going to be turning 34 a 3-year deal at X amount of money. What I like about him at the deadline is
depends on what X is.
Right. Well, X is probably 5 to 6 million.
Because I think 3 years, I could live with 3 years.
Yeah.
But I actually don't know that I'd go that high. And if that's what it takes to get him, then you may have to pass. I think if you got him somewhere more in the Foligno type money, which I have no idea what he's going to command. You've certainly done more research on that part of it than I have. But
the reason why I think he's going to command a lot is I think a lot of people are going to come after him.
Right. So if that number goes up to 5 per, that's probably about where, for me anyway, I'd say, hey, look, if that guy's on my third line making $5 million, maybe sometimes he's in the top 6, depending on who's playing, whatever it is. But you start to put together a middle 6 that would include a guy like him, a guy like Foligno. Now you got something.
What I like about Nelson, especially as a trade deadline pickup, is his faceoffs. He is 53.2%, which is amongst centers with a minimum. I forget what I put when I did the threshold. He's in the 40th, tied for 40th, believe it or not, I think with Sasha Barkov. But the other area where he is outstanding with, if you take a minimum of 55 shorthanded draws, he's 14th in the NHL at 50.9% on the penalty kill. And I think you and I would agree that their biggest issue on their penalty kill, Anthony, is losing that first draw all the time. Now, Freddie Gaudreau is actually pretty adequate in that with winning draws on the penalty kill. I think I forget what I put today. That's going to be in the Athletic on Monday. It's like in the 20th, 29th, I think, maybe ranked. The guys that have been horrendous this year on the penalty kill for faceoffs is Eriksson Ek and Huzadinov. They're both around 34, 33%, which is just brutal. Their save percentages have also been awful on the penalty kill, but that's where Nelson could help. So again, all this is probably moot if Kaprizov isn't out for the rest of the year. And that's the thing that I think people I get all the questions that I'm getting, but there almost seems to be this excitement that Kaprizov might be out longer. I think we're forgetting who we're talking about. Kirill Kaprizov is their best bet to make the playoffs. I think if you had your biggest objective at the deadline, it's that knowing that Kaprizov's going to be back, by late March and hoping that he's going to get a little runway to the playoffs and not make that big move. And then you're giving up your second round pick. You're giving up probably prospects. Like there's no way the Wild gave up their first round pick in the Jiricek deal. So unless you're giving up future first, it's going to be your second this year, and it's going to be prospects in either of those trades or both.
For sure. And I agree with the philosophy about what you have to give up now as opposed to just waiting till free agency. But I do think I have no idea. I haven't looked closely enough to really be able to say with any degree of certainty, like what fits, what could work, what in terms of salary and everything for deals this year at the deadline, stuff that could carry over. So, but those guys all help. And I love Brock Nelson's game. I agree with you on the penalty kill faceoffs, although I think lately it's been less of that first faceoff and then give up a goal before you ever get the clear. It's been more midway through power plays and even late in power plays.
Yeah, a couple seconds.
Yeah. And so early in the year, it was lose the first draw and bang, the puck was in your net. And some of that was when Eriksson Ek was out. I think their penalty kill, there have been stretches where it's passed the eye test, but not the stats test. Mm-hmm. And right now it feels like every time they go a man short, there's a pretty good chance a goal's coming. Yep. And I know they got the big kill in overtime yesterday, and there's a timely.
And they also did get the one where they challenged goalie interference, right, and lost.
But before that, had given up 2 power play goals, which is why they were down 2.
Yeah.
And in both cases felt like they had no chance to get a kill. So I don't know what has to happen with the penalty kill, but man, it has to be better down the stretch and into the playoffs, or it isn't going to matter whether they make the playoffs and who they play. If you're killing penalties in the mid 60s, it's going to be a short postseason run.
Absolutely. When we come back, I want to talk to you about the Four Nations. We'll get Vinny's thoughts, and I just want to talk to you more about how good Faber and Boldy were in the Four Nations, but also the Swedish guys as well. We'll be right back on Worst Seats in the House. Hockey isn't the only thing happening on the ice, and as lakes are freezing over, it's time for ice fishing. OnX Fish offers the most comprehensive fishing tools for increasing your confidence and success on the hard water. Use the Fish app to find new places to fish and sort lakes by species, abundance, trophy, and keeper potential. OnX Fish also shows you hotspots, lake-by-lake regulations, and private and public land ownership information. For a limited time, download OnX Fish for free in Minnesota and Wisconsin, or go to onxmaps.com/fish to get more information on the app that is changing the game on ice.
Royal Credit Union is your trusted advisor for all your business banking needs. Whether you're starting or growing a business, Royal offers a full suite of business account and lending solutions to meet the needs of your business now and into the future. Royal has business checking and savings accounts, business certificates and money markets, treasury management services, and business loans. Choose Royal Credit Union as your business's financial partner and get started today at rcu.org/Royal Business. Insured by NCUA. Loans subject to credit approval. Equal credit opportunity.
Hey, have you been dreaming of a lake cabin lifestyle with boating, fishing, and family fun in northern Minnesota? Well, lately I've thought a lot about how cool it would be to have a getaway like so many Minnesotans. And if you're like me, you probably think that owning your own lakeside getaway is beyond your budget. Well, if you think lake cabin real estate prices keep going up, well, think again. This is Russo, and I'm here to tell you there is an affordable way to enjoy a cabin lifestyle and all that goes with it. And yes, I said affordable. I founded a Clamshell Beach Resort, which is located on the Whitefish chain of 14 lakes for you and your family to enjoy. Here's how. Clamshell has lake homes that offer deeded fractional ownership, and the keywords there are deeded and fractional. You own it. Imagine having 5 weeks a year to enjoy Clamshell with its beaches, pool, and lodge that's full of kids' activities. Is golf your game? There's a great golf course right across the road. Like winter sports? Well, you can go ice fishing, cross-country skiing, or snowmobiling right out the door at Clamshell. And there's no maintenance, no grass mowing, no snow removal. It's done all for you. And you can own a share of Clamshell Beach Resort at an affordable price. To learn more about ownership opportunities at Clamshell Beach Resort, go to cottagesonwhitefish.com or contact Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. That's cottagesonwhitefish.com or Pat Egan at 612-220-9819. Back here, Worst Seats in the House, Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta, coming to you. By the way, I haven't mentioned March 12th is our next live show. That's at Elsie's at 7 p.m. March 12th at Elsie's at 7 p.m. So hope everybody comes on out for that. It'll be about 5 days after the trade deadline, and when we're back for that from that road trip. So a lot to talk about there. Maybe we'll we will hopefully at that point have some more clarity on what's going on with Kaprizov. Boldy and Faber just so good in the Four Nations. I thought, Boldy, had some great moments throughout. There were times where you wish that he maybe scored a little more on some of his chances. Faber was just tremendous with Jacob Slavin in the 2 Canada games. That last game against Canada, Anthony, I thought was the best I've ever seen Brock Faber look. Like in overtime, it's such a shame that they gave up that 1 goal to McDavid for the winner, because man, did Faber play great against McDavid earlier. And unfortunately, they put out Fox and Hannafin for that last draw. They iced the puck, and now they're caught in their own zone against McDavid and Marner. And boy, a trifecta of mistakes by Adam Fox, Anthony. He doesn't intercept the rim. He loses Marner, can't keep up with him, and then he can't get to the front of the net. Of their 8 defensemen, if you include Quinn Hughes, I got to think 7 are coming back for the Olympics, and Adam Fox will not be.
I thought Fox was terrible.
Yeah.
And I actually haven't been impressed with his game all season. This is a great segue into Vinny's thoughts, because he sent me a list of a letter grade for every player on the Team USA roster and said, here are my grades. I think you guys should give your grades. And even if you don't do every player, maybe the wild players and the notables, no pluses or minuses. Make a committed answer if you're going to do the grades.
Okay, Vinny.
Right. And so he gave Adam Fox a D. He looked
their
like
worst defenseman.
Yeah, he looked like you couldn't trust him on the ice.
Yeah,
it's hard to believe that this was 4 years ago. This guy was the Vezina or the Norris winner.
Yeah,
and
I remember how annihilated I got by Rangers fans for not having him. Even I don't even know if I had him on my ballot.
And he wouldn't have been in my top 3, but for sure he wouldn't have been. But I thought he was bad. The easy A's for McAvoy, Slavin, and Faber. I thought all 3 of those guys were great. I think.
Slavin, A+. Sorry, Vinny.
I thought Faber was just as good as he was. And Zach Werenski, I think this year has been as good as anybody in the league most of the year. And I thought he was great.
Yeah.
So
I thought Sanderson was great.
I thought he was just okay. Yeah. And then he scored.
Yeah.
In the first period, I really thought, boy, he looks like he's a deer in the headlights right now. And I wasn't watching him closely, but there were a number of shifts where I thought, boy, that he looks right now like he's playing scared. Mm-hmm. Then I thought he was really good second and third periods of that game.
Yeah. Hannafin will probably be back. Quinn Hughes will obviously be back. I didn't think he was great. And then, but the one thing I just wonder what they do with that 8th D, because you're going to bring 8D to Milan. So let's just say it is Hughes, Werenski, Faber, Slavin, Hannafin, Sanderson. That's 6. Who am I forgetting? McAvoy. So there's your 7. I wonder if the 8th D is going to be like Zev Boyum. Like you take, I think historic
young guy.
Like I think you take a young guy just to be around them, or an Alex Vlasic. Like somebody that's most likely not going to play, but you bring one of those guys. Like I
guess you'd have to look at who your guys are, because I'd want to have, if I have 8, mm-hmm. I'd want to have one extra guy that's a little bit more of the puck moving, offensive minded, mm-hmm. and then one that's more of the sturdy penalty kill, maybe a little stronger guy, just in case.
Right. Which again could be Hannafin and Boyum.
It could be.
One's the puck mover in Boyum. Yeah, the other's
could be Hannafin. Yeah. And Vlasic could be more mm-hmm. of the penalty kill type guy than the offensive guy. Because I would want to have that kind of flexibility, whether it be to injury if somebody goes down, mm-hmm. but also if, let's just say you're struggling on the penalty kill or something and you want to, hey, we got to throw an extra of that type of player in the mix. Maybe you're playing a more physical opponent, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I'd want to have a little flexibility. I wouldn't want to get stuck having the same 2 of the same type as my 7 and 8.
Right. And then I really think they got to look. So they didn't score a ton of goals. Obviously, like Miller, Hughes, Eichel, although Eichel I thought was good. Austin Matthews, none of these guys scored goals. And then their bottom 6, I thought they did their job. Like I liked JT Miller's game, didn't score. But then, you do have to wonder about guys like Vinny Trocheck and Chris Kreider and Brock Nelson, because they left a lot of good players off this lineup. Like they, you obviously, don't have Tage Thompson there. You don't have Cole Caulfield there. You don't have Clayton Keller there. You just wonder if maybe you have to, Jason Robertson, you have to wonder if maybe you add some of these offensive guys, like in this type of tournament. What do you think?
I agree. Again, though, it comes back to the type of player. And I know that's why they took some of those older, more veteran guys. And so you do have to look at how your lineup's going to shake out. If you get rid of all of those guys and replace them with all scorer type guys like Thompson and Caulfield, I mean, look at the impact like Joel Eriksson Ek had on Team Sweden. Wasn't their first or second line center, but might have been their most valuable player.
Yeah.
And you have to have guys like that. So I think I'd really have to take a closer look at the rest of
I think Trocheck and Miller make a lot of sense. Kreider and Nelson are the ones that you just wonder if they're going to age out. Yeah, Kreider can't be back. I would bring a Tage Thompson next time. Just his size, his offense, his ability on the power play. I think he could kill penalties, can win draws, things like that. I didn't love Connor in the tournament. Jack Hughes I thought was terrible. And maybe it's because
he was invisible.
Yeah, like maybe it's because he wasn't playing center, and I get why they didn't want him at center because defensively you're going up against the McKinnons and the McDavids and things like that. But it just felt like on the wing he was sort of miscast. Obviously he's going to be there, but he needs to be better. The guy that impressed me from start to finish, and it's not just because, as I said on the last week's podcast, he sat next to me on the plane going to Montreal. The first game for the tournament was Dylan Larkin. Like I just thought Larkin was awesome throughout the tournament. What did Vinny think?
He thought Larkin was good. Let me just double check what his grade was for Larkin. He has Larkin with an A, has Kreider with an F. That we agree with that. He has Hughes with a D. I think I'd agree with that. It was some of the other guys that, Nelson C, Trocheck C, those are the guys that I think some of those guys are going to have to be really good if the U.S. is going to have success.
Right.
Those have to be your third, fourth.
What do you have for Matthews?
Matthews, he has a C, and I think I agree with that.
I do too. He had one great game, and that was the final. But even there, he doesn't score in overtime, and he loses McDavid on the winner.
And I thought that was the way he looked for most of the tournament. Was just a little bit off, just a little.
Yeah. Him and Hughes didn't mesh too well together.
No,
the guy that I thought was awesome is Jake Ensel. Like that guy, that's what Jack Hughes, if he's going to want to win cups in the NHL, has got to play more like Jake Gensel.
Yeah, they're different players.
I know that, but Jake, the one, I guess from this standpoint, Jake Gensel is basically Hughes' size soaking wet. And who has got bigger balls than that guy? Like he goes to the dirty areas. He gets into all sorts of contact. He plays with piss and vinegar at times. Maybe it's having the two brothers where, the fighting growing up, who knows, but there's something about him that just he plays just such a gritty game for such a goal scorer. And I thought he was awesome. And it's a shame that actually to start the tournament, it just didn't mesh really well at even strength with Austin and Jack Hughes, because I thought Gensel was outstanding. And when he wound up playing with Boldy in the final game with Eichel, at times, I thought they were really good. Let me ask you what you think of the Tkachuk brothers, because they obviously added incredible heartbeat to this team, but they were also maybe a little stubborn, especially Matthew playing that final game, Anthony.
Stubborn for sure. And maybe selfish, you might say, that where he clearly wasn't healthy. And those are the points where you got to have a guy be willing to say, look, I'm just not right.
Yeah. And they should know that he wasn't right. And for that very reason, to pull Connor out and then play Kreider and Trocheck like 8 minutes or whatever it was, maybe even less, in an overtime game, now you're suddenly going with 9 forwards the rest of the game because Tkachuk wasn't playing. It felt like I get Connor wasn't very good, and I get in a short tournament you don't really have the latitude to allow guys to play out of their struggles. But to pull Connor for Kreider, then barely use him, knowing that Tkachuk was hurt and might not get through the game, it just seemed like a bad decision by the staff on that one.
Yeah, and I actually think we should give some credit to John Cooper and the Canadian staff. Mm-hmm. I thought they did a great job massaging their lines over the course of the tournament, subtle changes that really seemed to work. And I suppose it shouldn't be as a surprise. I mean, he's been really good in the NHL for a long time, but I thought they did a great job with that. And it felt like the U.S. had some combos that just didn't really work.
Yeah. I mean, 7 goals by McDavid and McKinnon, and the American Stars, with the exception of Gensel, really didn't score at all. And that really is what comes down to it.
I thought Boldy's game was great.
Yeah.
I thought I think it really was I'm wondering if that'll be a big confidence boost for him, just to
looked like it yesterday.
Yeah. And you just went and played against the best in the world, and they were leaning on you.
And we've discussed this before. Like, if Kaprizov is done for the rest of the regular season, or at least for the next month, this is now where, if Matt Boldy needs to step up, you are the star now. You have to take.
And he did that well when Kaprizov was out in the past. He's had a couple stretches where it's been, remember how good Johansson and Eriksson Ek were a couple of years ago, the year they acquired Johansson, where they took off and had to carry the load and did. So we'll see if he can do it again.
Yep, absolutely. Let's. I know that Wild fans love this, but let's give some kudos to Jordan Binnington, because man, he
was good.
Yeah, he was great, especially in overtime. 3 great looks by, when Jake Gensel set up Austin Matthews at the back door and Binnington's robbed him in overtime, I turned to CJ. I'm like, uh-oh. Yeah. That's when you've just felt like that was the look that was going to win the game for the Americans.
That's what Binnington has been.
Yeah.
He's been the guy that he'll give up 2 goofy ones and get blown out, get yanked, get pulled from a game, and then the next night stand on his head like he did in the playoff run a couple of years ago. And remember when he came out of nowhere that year? I mean, literally out of nowhere. Nobody even knew who he was.
Mike Yeo got fired.
I remember texting Mike Yeo late that season saying, did you guys ever see this coming? He said, we didn't even know who he was. He said, I had never seen him before.
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, when Mike Yeo was fired, didn't they have the worst save percentage in the league?
Yeah. And Binnington came about maybe 3 weeks later. Yeah. But in fact, if I remember the story right, they had loaned him to the ECHL or something earlier in the year. I mean, he wasn't even on the Blues radar. But then he just has that ability to make big saves in big games, and he was the best player on the ice in that game. For
a guy that we've all seen that could lose it in games, there is something about him that he's just level-headed. Like, even just going into the game, talking to him the day before, he was so calm. And then there's that clip where there's an old school clip where he and St. Louis reporter are having a back and forth, and he just looks to the guy and goes, "Do I look nervous to you?" Like that before a huge game. So, I mean, that's the type of
cockiness to him.
Yeah,
sure.
That's the type of goalie you want in net. Somebody like, that is, sort of level-headed like that, even though, he talks a lot. That there's something about him, because we've seen that he loses his cool. But the one thing, his big line, so he must, see somebody away from the ice, but he talks about being centered all the time, getting back to being centered. So clearly, I think that he sees somebody away from the ice, to, a sports psychologist or something, and tries to get into mental zones that obviously in the biggest game since the Stanley Cup final, obviously was just absolutely unbelievable. Crosby as good as ever. McDavid, McKinnon,
just awesome. All the little things. I thought McDavid was invisible in the final and then scores the winner.
Yeah, absolutely, because he was having to go up against Faber and Slavin all game. Man, Slavin's unreal. Like, he's the type of guy that you have to watch in person all the time. Right. Probably similar to Brodin.
That's exactly right. And I remember I said that going into the tournament. I said, what I've always loved about Carolina is there's so much hype about some of their offensive defensemen. But to me, it was always Slavin and Pesce that made them so good, because those guys were just so responsible, and you just never had the puck when they were on the ice. And I think Slavin he's Jonas Brodin minus a couple of years, 3 years.
Yep, absolutely. Wild stories in the tournament, the whole Quinn Hughes thing, where the United States essentially announced that Quinn Hughes is coming to replace the injured Charlie McAvoy. And then all of a sudden, he, 5 hours after they announced this, he shows up on the ice in Vancouver. Like, what are the chances? And then just a ton of back and forth between Pat Brisson, Bill Guerin, and Jim Rutherford and Patrick Alvin. And finally, it's decided the next day that he's not flying across the country to not play. and essentially they said that he wasn't medically cleared, so he didn't come. And then they announced. I give Brett Pesci credit; he comes up there just to be insurance. I give Tage Thompson credit. He went into the tournament. He didn't make the team. Went into the tournament hurt as well, but the Buffalo Sabres let him go, and that was cool of him to just pop in there for no reason, especially when he had to be pretty bummed they didn't make the team from the very beginning.
Right. And so this actually was one of the topics I wanted to get into with you, was the injuries and the roster and everything. That's something they've got to fix, because having such small rosters, and I understand the motivation behind it was so that you could let guys go and not, but you're in the middle of February, in the middle of the grind of a season, you're going to have guys, and now you're going to play games at the fastest pace that you've seen all year. You need to have extra guys there. And do you really think, let's say you're Tage Thompson, if you had been added to this roster and never played, do you think it really would have, obviously you would have preferred to play, but it's not like you would have had, if you had 2 extra forwards and 2 extra defensemen with you, at least then there's not all this.
Yeah. Well, if you remember back in December, I wrote a story where Bill Guerin publicly hammered the PA and the league for not allowing a 25-man rosters, and all the mess at the end could have been alleviated if they had put 25-man rosters. I think there were multiple reasons for it from a league and a PA standpoint. The biggest one is that the PA did not want guys giving up their Four Nations break vacations and coming there and not playing.
Yeah, so how about you throw that to the individual player?
Yeah.
Look, you are the 23rd player.
Yeah.
Would you like to come? Because if not, we'll call the next guy on the list.
That's a great point.
If you'd rather go to Costa Rica, go to Costa Rica, and then we'll bring somebody else.
And then the other reason, let's not beat around the bush. It's cost. You're talking about 8 extra players, total for the 4 teams. That's 8 guys that you're essentially paying. It's 8 guys that you have to get insurance for. It's 8 the cost of hotels and bringing their families in and all that type of stuff. So that's definitely part of the reason as well. But I think that if you asked both Marty Walsh and Gary Bettman right now, they'd probably say we should have had 25 guys. And this won't be an issue for the Olympics because there will be 25 guys. That is the IHF rule for the Olympic Committee's rule for the men's hockey.
Did we talk about the format for not the format, but just the fact that when they made the announcement that they're going to have this tournament in the 2 years in between Olympics, which I love, but expand it. And I thought it was strange that they just quickly threw out immediately, we're going to have 8 teams.
Yeah, especially when you're saying the IIHF is not going to be involved. So now you're going to have to get a couple federations to essentially stop your seasons to be able to send players over here because there's not enough German players in the NHL to have a team. There's not enough. There are enough Czech guys, but not Slovak. So there's going to have to be.
There's going to have to be some. But I think you could have just said we're looking at an expanded field and left it at that.
Yeah.
To come out and say it's going to be 8. I mean, what are the 8?
And they've already said that the 8 are going to be countries that they have no intention of doing, like Team North
Europe
America
or
Team Europe or things
so
like that.
I mean, if you assume that Russia is one of them, and you're counting on the fact, and
I would think Russia, Switzerland, Czechia, and Slovakia. So clearly the Czechs and the Russians have enough. So essentially, you are going to probably have to go to the Swiss league and the Slovak league, and you're going to have to essentially pay them to allow. They're going to do it in the calendar where those nation the IHF calendar that they're on break anyway. But to get to your other point, on the timing of this and having it in February, I do think that the league wants to have it in February because it's sort of their calendar, right? There's no football, there's no baseball other than spring training, things like that. But the issue is that this is a different league now than it was years ago. The pace of play is unbelievable. Clearly, this is not the way it was years ago when you had this type of format. And so I just wonder if you do have to consider putting it before the season. I don't think they want to change it, but guys are going to get hurt, and you're doing this right in front of the stretch drive, and you are going to be doing this every 2 years between Olympics, World Cup. And we see right now Matthew Tkachuk has a major injury. Charlie McAvoy is out probably for the season for Boston. I think Vincent Trocheck is dealing with something. Brady Tkachuk's obviously dealing with something. And there's other guys that we know, Shea Theodore that's out. They're guys got hurt in this tournament. It's going to affect their NHL teams.
There's no perfect time to have it in terms of injury risk. But I just think if you do it at the beginning of the year, even a player that gets hurt at least has a decent chance to get back and be ready for the NHL postseason. Right now, you're losing guys when you're 8 weeks away from the playoffs starting.
Mm-hmm.
So your window to get guys back is just that much shorter. Doesn't mean they'd miss any less time, doesn't necessarily decrease the injury risk, other than that maybe guys are just, they're fresh and healthy in August. But you do have the guys on top of their game in February.
Yeah.
And maybe everybody just has to accept it and say, this might happen.
Yeah. And obviously we'll see what Vegas does with that IR space. They're going to be able, they're going to pull something, and they usually go after the top players out there. Like, half of me wonders if they're going to go after like a Brad Marchand. And then same thing with Florida, because I think Tkachuk has a major injury. When we come back, I do want to talk to you about the Charlie McAvoy injury and all the shade that clearly the Boston Bruins were throwing on that. And then we got some Twitter questions as well. And maybe we have more of Vinny's thoughts. We'll be back on Worst Seats in the House. Aquarius Home Services offers 5-star rated HVAC, water treatment, plumbing, and electrical services throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin. And I'm telling you right now, don't let the cold take over. Keep your home warm and worry-free this winter. And you could do this by saving $98 on repairs for all furnace repairs from a company you trust this winter. And this $98 off deal isn't just for furnace repairs. It's applicable for plumbing and electrical as well. How do you get this? $98 off. Visit AquariusHomeservices.com to get your heat back fast. Go again to AquariusHomeservices.com. Aquarius, earning the right to be recommended. And don't forget to mention that Russo sent you.
We love supporting local businesses. We love working with local businesses. I started buying stuff at Twill in the Edina Galleria a long time ago. When I started this podcast network, I was really hoping I'd be able to work with Scott Dayton, the founder and owner of Twill, and I was lucky enough to be able to do so. Now my closet is pretty much all Twill stuff. I don't get free stuff. I don't get discounts. I don't ask for discounts. I go there and pay full freight because I want to support a local business also because the stuff is awesome. Just bought a fresh batch. I'm about to go on a vacation with my wife. Everything I'm packing is Twill stuff because it wears well. It's comfortable. It doesn't wrinkle on planes. It doesn't wrinkle in suitcases. It comes out looking good. It wears like iron, and I'm never going to have to replace it. It's just so simple. Everything from casual shoes to dressy shoes to golf stuff to dress stuff to suits. By the way, you get everything tailor fit, which really helps me out. And everything from, gopher stuff to winter stuff to summer stuff. They just have everything. So go to twillmn.com, sign up for email updates. They won't send you anything unless they have a very specific event they want you to know about. They won't spam you. And go in there and say hello. Tell them we sent you. It's just a pleasant group of knowledgeable people. They are experts at what they do. It's the best men's clothing store in Minnesota. Go check out Twill online and in person in the Edina Galleria.
Keep the good times rolling without the regrets. Giggly THC beverages are your go-to for bold flavor and smooth vibes. Zero alcohol and no bad decisions. Just THC-infused cocktails, seltzers, and teas packed with natural ingredients and performance-boosting superfoods like ashwagandha and ginseng. Find Giggly at over 500 locations like Total Wine, MGM, and Cub Foods, or shop online at giggly.com. That's GIGLI.com. Ready to upgrade your drink game? Well, use code GIGGLYNORTH for 50% off your first order. Giggly. Sip smarter, feel better. Final segment of Worst Seats in the House. Michael Russo, Anthony LaPanta. Elsie's, March 12th, 7 p.m. Make sure you put that on the LaPanta household calendar, Anthony, and everybody else out there as well.
Let me plug that in right now.
March 12th, 7 p.m.
I think I got it.
Elsie's.
You mentioned Vinny's thoughts. We had a couple from a couple weeks ago that we never really got to, and it was one of them that we talked through the Faber Bedard combination thing, but he had thrown to us the difference between the time and the requirements to get guys ready to play from position to position. And part of what he threw out with that was what the Wild have seen in the way their defensive prospect pool has evolved and changed. So what are your thoughts on that with the comparing defensemen, whether it's from how you scout them, how accurate it is to be able to assess their abilities, to how long it takes them compared to forwards, skill guys, the difference between forwards and defensemen. What are
I
your
mean, there's
thoughts?
just something. It's such a hard position to play the blue line, and I'm still not willing to give up on everybody that's in Iowa, but I just think that it's so much easier to come into the NHL and play forward, and that's why we see, especially even in Bill Guerin's case, he sort of slow plays defensemen and not so much forwards. Faber was a rare breed. We'll see if Zev Boyum is the same thing. I mean, like he is a special player. But what Brock did, I just think that we're all going to have to realize was pretty special. But I don't know. I mean, that's just that's my immediate thought on this. I did want to talk to you about so I was going to be doing at some point next year. Everybody will see a McAvoy favorite story because I was working on a hilarious story on how they're doppelgangers. And unfortunately, it never saw the light of day because it was going to run on Tuesday. And obviously, we found out Monday that he was in dire straits and in the hospital because of an infection that he got from an injection for an AC joint injury that was sustained actually in the Finland game in Montreal. And clearly, he had some sort of injection to allow him to play against Canada. He was unbelievable against Canada. Then what the Bruins did is they a team that always is barely gives out even upper and lower body. They put out this explicit medical report on what was going on with McAvoy. They made it extremely clear that he was taken out of the care of the U.S. doctors and medical staff and put back into care with the Bruins, and that they were the one that figured this out and made sure that he was taken care of and all this stuff. And what they were clearly also doing behind the scenes that a lot of reporters were dealing with is they were making it extremely clear that they were not happy with the level of care that the U.S. Staff gave McAvoy. Now, I don't buy it completely because I also know that the U.S. staff, the medical staff, visited McAvoy in the hospital, and they were reassured by him that not only have they that he feels that he was cared for, but that this has happened before in his career, that he's gotten infections from injections from actually Bruins doctors. But like the Bruins often do, led by Cam Neely and also Don Sweeney in this case, is that they, in their statements, they're sort of passive-aggressive statements. They throw the U.S. doctors under the bus. Today, Don Sweeney talks to the reporters, would not go that far, in his first opportunity. And the reason why this is a big deal is that from Wild fan standpoint, they know that Dr. Boyd, Joel Boyd, was the team doctor, and they know that John Worley and Travis Green were on the medical staff, the two of the three athletic trainers. And I do think that Bill Guerin is probably going to have to come out this week and at least give them a public reassurance that from his standpoint, that he has the utmost confidence in them, because Wild fans are now just equating that this is why the Wild have been injured the last 2 years. Like, first of all, like Dr. Boyd is the doctor for everything, and right. that and that he's the
surgeon,
right? And also that he's the one that got Zuccarello taking a puck to the groin, and right. and Eriksson Ek elbowed in the face, and it just. The other thing here is that I think that people don't realize that this wasn't just Bill Guerin bringing his staff. Like, Joel Boyd has been the USA team doctor since since 98 in Nagano. I mean, he's just always been the doctor, and he has been the day one orthopedic surgeon for the Wild since the year 2000. This is an impeccable doctor,
right?
And for the Bruins to basically throw them under the bus without giving any sort of other details about where they thought that the level of care was off.
Did Charlie McAvoy say much about it?
No, and from what I understand is that when USA visited him in the hospital, that he basically said, "Don't worry, one, that this has happened to me before, but two, that they were on board with all the level of care that he was getting." So regardless of that, it just seemed like, pretty, like, if you have a problem with the USA doctors and you think that the care wasn't good, then come out and have a press conference and say what you think. But I think that this just comes down to that they're a frustrated organization that lost a top defenseman for the rest of the year, and they're upset about it. And they have every right to be frustrated by that, and it's unfortunate. But from doing my questioning to the NHL, who has looked into this matter, the NHL is confident that while it's unfortunate that Charlie got hurt, that they feel that not only did the USA doctors give him the level of care that was appropriate, but that it was in consultation with the Bruins. So
maybe focus on the hit by Joel Armia instead.
Yeah.
Which was a cheap shot.
Yep, absolutely. So anyway, I just needed to get that out because a lot of Wild fans now.
I've seen some of that.
Yeah.
the throwback from fans toward that and dismiss that. I just didn't read too much into what the Bruins had said about it.
Yep. By the way, tomorrow's picture that will be on X with this podcast is Anthony doing a podcast while he's peeling garlic. Which brings me to my first question.
We have a great Sunday dinner coming up right after this show is over. Picanha steak. It's going to be terrific. We got
actually, so somebody asked,
potatoes.
but I can't tell if he's actually asking or if this is being tongue in cheek. It's almost like Fallness's burner account, but he goes, "What's Anthony's steak grilling process, start to finish, every detail, please?" Which is why I think it's might be a little bit of tongue in cheek.
I don't know. I get asked that a lot. Sarcastic. Actually, it's been. We were joking about this a little bit while we were in Costa Rica because we were hanging around with AJ and his now fiance Ariana, and we were just talking about. I took some pictures of food because we had made a couple dinners there. Mm-hmm. And so Margot shared the story with how it really all came to be. It was not me just deciding I'm going to start taking pictures of my dinners. It was our company, Fox Sports North at the time, that came and said, this is what people like. They did a study on things we had done on social media. They said, people love seeing what happens in your house. And I
remember
told
when
them,
me and Chad Graff did the cooking at LaPanta's or something, and oh man, you can find that on YouTube still.
But it just happened organically. People always asking, and now I probably get stopped to talk about food almost as often as I get stopped to talk hockey. But anyway, so the steaks we're going to have. I've been doing more reverse searing. We've done some of that lately. Tonight we are going to throw them on the grill. So to answer the question, it really depends on the cut of steak, and if it's a ribeye, a thick cut ribeye, I want it to be more medium rare because you got to get it up to mid 130s before the fat will melt, and that gives it all the flavor. So for a good thick cut ribeye, I might go just a hair lower temp. But when I say lower, it's because when I do a strip or a fillet, I crank that grill up as high as I can possibly get it and go maybe 2-3 minutes aside. If it's a ribeye, I might go just a hair lower than that and maybe go more like 4.5 minutes aside. But I like a char on the outside. And then normally I'm a rare plus guy when it comes to fillets or New York strips. These picanhas, we had them the other night. They are terrific. So for these.
By the way, did you bring me some Costa Rican coffee?
I did bring you some Costa Rican coffee.
You know what I actually love? I meant to tell you this.
We went to the Dumpy Sloth for coffee one morning. And then
named after a former NHLer?
It could be. And then we went back to another place for a coffee and chocolate tour, which was fascinating down there.
So my favorite coffee from Costa Rica is actually Cafe Brit. Did you see that?
No.
And you can actually buy that online and they'll deliver it to you, and it comes right from Costa Rica. I love that place. Anyway, I did want to ask you about Ryan Hartman. Well, first of all, just an update on the Ryan Hartman appeal process. So that happened way back on February 14th. If you remember, the incident happened on February 1st. So here we are 24 days since the incident. And he files the appeal thinking that it's going to expedite things. And obviously it hasn't, because he met with Bettman on February 14th and we still don't have a ruling out. Now, Bettman actually flew yesterday from New York to LA, or Teterboro to LA for the big charity thing that they're doing for the fires at Staples Center or Crypto. And so maybe on that long plane ride, he wrote his ruling and it's going to come out on Monday. But I'm looking forward to it. But at this point, he's going to be suspended for the 5th of 10 games coming up here in a couple days against Detroit.
What's your guess? What do you think?
I think it's upheld. If anything, he gets a couple games back. But I guess by the time it goes to an independent arbitrator, at that point you're fighting to get money back. You're not getting games back. Like, it's going to, by the time it gets at this point to an arbitrator, I mean, he's due back into the Wild lineup on March 9th. I don't think it's going to be, I mean, what is that? 4 days. It's 13 days away. I don't know if we're going to have a ruling by then.
Well, that would be tough if you waited this long to get your appeal resolved, and then you wind up, like, let's say they come back and say, yeah, we would go to 8.
Yeah.
But you're already at 8 or past.
Yeah. At least to get a good amount of money back, 80 some odd grand. Wild Boys 59 guys, prediction from you guys: does Hartman get traded or bought out this summer? So here's the interesting facet if you look at the NHL calendar. So he's got a no move clause until July 1, essentially. Then it turns into a modified no trade. Well, the buyout period goes from about June 15th to June 30th. So you could buy him out before you could trade him, theoretically. So it's going to be really fascinating if the Wild go to that point, and I really do think that Billy Guerin will at a minimum try to trade him this summer. Do you not buy him out, and do you try to use the offseason to try to find a trade partner? And then once it comes July 1 and he turns in his no trade list, you hope that team's not on it. I mean, that might be what it really comes down to. But the timing of his leverage, his control, actually is sort of the opposite of what the Wild need. So again, you don't really want to make your first option that you trade him, that you buy him out, but the buyout window is before you're allowed to essentially trade him unless he's going to waive his no trade.
And don't you think you'd know if you had trade partners by then.
Yeah.
But the little wrinkle in it is his role in it. But you might be able to go to him and say, look, this is who we're thinking. Do you want to go there? Yeah. If so, we'll make a deal instead of buying you out. And I think there's ways to make that, even though the dates might not line up, that you can make that work.
Yep. Zach asks, has Rossi done enough to prove to Guerin he is part of the long-term future, or are they still not sure? I think Bill would love him to be part of the long-term future, but I think it's got to be at a contract that he believes is requisite of what he's willing to pay. And, I don't think the Wild want to pay him more than Matt Boldy. Well, Matt Boldy makes $7. It's a different position. It's 2 years after Matt signed. I don't think that
going up.
The cap's going up. So if he wants $8-9 million on a long-term deal and the Wild don't want to do that, they will trade him. Or you just QO him and hope that you get him down on a short-term deal. But even a bridge deal, I think that's going to be more than the Wild are willing to stomach. So I don't think, you and I have talked about this a lot. I think that it would be foolish not to re-sign him, but there's a certain price point that the Wild are willing to give him. And if he wants more than Matt Boldy, which I assume he does, that might be too much for the Wild to stomach.
Yeah. And to be clear, he's not asking for more than Matt Boldy because he thinks he's a better player than Matt Boldy, but it's just the finances are different.
Yeah.
The league cap is going up.
It's also a different position.
And it's a different position.
Yeah. We talked about the odds. Somebody asked of getting a top 6 forward. A lot of trade deadline questions. We talked about this. Minnesota Independent Mail God 1991 goes, how do the Wild help or make Boldy understand that how he played at the Four Nations is what to expect of him? Get to the net, drive to the net, become more physically. This could have been a turning point. Look, that is why the Wild. This is what Bill Guerin wants from him. And he brought it in the Four
I thought
Nations.
he was great.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more with the assessment. And we mentioned that earlier in the show that I really think it could be a springboard for him to say, all right, you just went up against the best in the world. And I just think it's pretty cool when you really think about it. These are players that we watch on an everyday basis. But now all of a sudden you've got the United States coaching staff in charge. And it's Faber playing the most minutes on the back end. It's Boldy playing the most minutes on the front end. It's Joel Eriksson Ek being labeled by the Swedes as their most valuable guy. It's Jonas Brodin playing on their top pair on the back end. It's Gustafsson getting the start in game 1 for Sweden. These are all guys that we've watched, and there's a little bit of I think sometimes you just get that feel like, are we really biased because we're watching them? And I think it's pretty cool when you look at how all of them fared, all of them represented. The answer to that is no.
Yeah, and that they would have given anything on that last shift of the game to have Faber and Slavin out there. And to your point, and Boldy for that matter, to your point, it didn't happen and they lost the game. A couple more. Your off-season asks, what's to make of Vinny Hinostroza? Do you think he takes his best friend's roster spot? Vinny's been good.
He's been good. He's not going to take his roster spot, but I think he's been good enough where
probably cost Devin Shore his spot eventually.
And it probably changes the way you build your lineup when everybody comes back. He's been good. He's going to have to maintain it.
Yeah.
There's still a few
games. And obviously
Lauko
is clearly dealing with something that, I could see him in the lineup over Lauko when both are healthy. And let's see, one last final question. Somebody asked me about the Canes trading Rantanen. So basically, they're trying to re-sign him and give him a fortune, but he right now, it sounds like, is not sold on re-signing there. And so if they get to the deadline, even though they gave up Natchez and Jack Chury, they might have to consider putting him on the market as a rental, and there's going to be a lot of teams lining up to get him. Hey, maybe with the 9 million the Wild have, you go after Rantanen and not even the other guys, right?
And then you say, all right, we can make the playoffs with Rantanen and Kaprizov on LTIR.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? All right, that's a good show. That's it. Can't wait to have the Sunday dinner. The garlic is peeled.
It's ready to be chopped.
Yep. And you know what we didn't talk about quickly is the lamb lung that Phil and Stanley have. Like, do you feel bad that these lamb, are giving their lungs to Phil and Stanley?
Well, do you feel badly that the cows that gave you the steak you're going to have tonight are...
That's the end of the show. Speaking of cows, Feller's Ranch, awesome sponsor. March 12th is our next live show. That is at Elsie's. That is at 7 p.m. So definitely come on down. Thanks to our incredible sponsors and for listening to us from the Aquarius Home Services studio. Aquarius Home Services, your local authorized dealer for Connecticut water treatment systems. But everything there, plumbing, heating, cooling, electrical, everything. Royal Credit Union, Feller's Ranch, Twill in the Edina Galleria, Onyx Fish, Clamshell Beach Resorts, and Giggly THC Beverages. Thanks, everybody.
So much coming out, there's nothing going in. I know that you feel like you're never gonna win. Oh, but the world